You walked into that building for the last time and you didn't know it. You carried the same bag, wore the same shoes, took the same route through the same door you had opened 10,000 times before. The fluorescent lights hummed above you the way they always had. The coffee machine in the corner was already gurgling. Someone waved at you in the hallway. You waved back. Nothing told you. Not the air, not the light, not the pit in your stomach that you had long ago learned to ignore. Nothing in this ordinary Tuesday morning whispered that in 5 minutes your entire identity was about to be erased. 20 years. Think about what that number means. 20 years is not a job. It is a life. It is every early morning when you choose them over sleep. Every birthday dinner you left before dessert. Every vacation is cut short. Every promise to your family that began with the words, just one more year. 20 years of proving yourself, of swallowing your pride, of building something you believed in, and then a door closed, and someone read from a paper, and it was over before your coffee went cold. You sat in that chair, and the words didn't land immediately. They never do. The mind has this extraordinary protection mechanism. It hears the unthinkable, and it translates it into something manageable, something survivable, something that sounds almost like a mistake. Surely a mistake. You've been here since the beginning. You trained the people who are still walking free through those corridors right now. You know where every file lives. You know the password to the old server that nobody else remembers. You know this place the way you know your own hands. They kept talking, restructuring, difficult decision, nothing personal. We appreciate your years of service, nothing personal. 2 words that contain the full weight of institutional betrayal. They said nothing personal, and what they meant was you are not a person here. You are a function, and the function has been discontinued. You tried to speak. Maybe you did speak. Maybe you said something careful and composed because even in that moment, even while your world was pulling apart at the seams, you were still performing professionalism for people who had already stopped seeing you. That's what 20 years does to a person. It trains you to make yourself small enough to fit whatever container the company needs you to fit. It teaches you to absorb the shocks quietly, to smile through the discomfort, to be grateful, to be useful, to be needed. And the cruelest part isn't the firing. The cruelest part is that you were good. You were not mediocre. You were not coasting. You were not the person who deserved this. You were the one who stayed late, the one who solved the problems before they became catastrophes, the one who mentored the younger ones, the one who held things together when the leadership changed and changed again and changed again. They kept that part quiet in the meeting. They kept very quiet about your record. They handed you a folder, severance terms in black ink on white paper, clean and cold and already notarized, which means they had already decided before you sat down, which means they had already decided before you came in this morning, which means you walked in through that door carrying 20 years on your back, and they had already written the ending before you arrived. That is not a difficult decision, that is a calculated one, and you sat there and you took it. Because you were still trying to be professional, you drove home in silence. Not the peaceful kind, the hollow kind, the kind of silence that sits in the passenger seat and stares at you, the kind that follows you through the front door and into the kitchen and stands with you while you put the kettle on and then remembers that you don't want tea. The day stretched out in front of you like a foreign country. No emails to answer, no calls to take, and no problem to walk into and solve. No version of yourself that the morning required, just you. Standing in the kitchen at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, still wearing the clothes you put on to go to work. The grief came in stages, first the disbelief, then the anger that shook you so hard you had to sit down, then the shame, God, the shame. That quiet, irrational shame that has nothing to do with what you actually did or didn't do, and everything to do with what you believed about yourself. You had built your identity inside those walls. You had told yourself that your worth lived in your position, your title, your role. And now the role was gone, and you didn't know who was left. You thought about the people you'd worked with, whether they knew, whether they were talking about it in the kitchen right now while the same coffee machine gurgled, whether anyone would push back, whether anyone would say this isn't right. Nobody pushed back. Nobody said anything. You know that now. And the silence from them hurt almost as much as the silence in your own house, because it confirmed something you had been afraid to believe for years, that you were replaceable, that it was never about loyalty, that it was only ever about convenience. Here is what is also true. You are not your job title. You never were. You spent 20 years believing you were, and that belief cost you more than this company ever paid you back. The version of you that walked out of that building is not broken. That version is awake. for the first time in years, awake. Because the structure that held you in place, that comfortable, suffocating structure, is gone. And what happens when a structure falls away is not always collapse. Sometimes it is release. You gave everything you had to an institution, and institutions are not capable of love. They are not capable of loyalty in return. They are machines built for function, and when a function becomes costly, they end it. This is not evil, it is just the nature of what they are. And you mistook a machine for a relationship. That mistake is understandable. That mistake is human. But that mistake ends here. 20 years of skill do not disappear because someone read from a paper. 20 years of discipline, problem solving, leadership, endurance, that is yours. You carry it. No folder, no meeting, no 5-minute conversation can reach inside you and extract what you have actually learned, built and become. They took the role. They did not take the capability. They took the title. They did not take the knowledge. They closed the door. They cannot close the person who walked through it every single day and kept something alive through sheer force of will. You are not starting over. You are starting from everything you've ever earned. That is not the same thing. That is not even close to the same thing. And the difference between those two ideas is where your next chapter begins. Now listen carefully, because this is where most people fail. Most people take this pain and they turn it inward. They let the shame calcify into paralysis. They spend 6 months staring at job boards and sending the same resume into the same void and calling that effort. They wait to feel ready. They wait for someone to tell them they're still valuable. They outsource their recovery to external validation and then wonder why they're still empty. You cannot do that. You have to do the uncomfortable thing first, before the job search, before the networking, before any of it. You have to sit down alone and write out exactly what you are good at without referencing a single job title. Strip the corporate language out entirely. No results-driven professional, no leverage synergies. What did you actually solve? What did you actually build? What would have broken without you? Write it, by hand, in your own words. This is not an exercise, this is reconstruction. Then you go to the people who saw you work, not to ask for references, to ask for perspective. Ask them what they came to you for. Ask them what problem you were having when it was on their mind. The answers will tell you something your title never could. Then you identify the specific gap you fill, not the general category, the specific problem. The intersection of what you know, what you've survived, and what the world still cannot solve without someone like you. That intersection is your next position, and it is not necessarily behind a corporate desk. You have to be willing to price your experience correctly. Not what the market offers, what the experience is worth. There is a difference. You spent 20 years acquiring something nobody hands out. You no longer negotiate from desperation. You negotiate from clarity. Then you build the container before you need it. You do not wait until the new role is secured to begin rebuilding your professional presence. You write, you speak, you show up in the spaces where your expertise is visible. You let the work speak before the interview does. You are not the person who was let go. You are the person who survived the letting go. And that version is harder. That version is leaner and more honest and less willing to trade silence for security. That version has looked at the thing it feared most, being unceremoniously discarded after a lifetime of devotion, and it is still standing in the kitchen, still here, still thinking, still breathing. The world will not hand you what comes next, but it never did. Everything you built before, you built inside a system that could revoke it at any moment. What you build now, you build for keeps. And there is a kind of freedom in that terror that very few people ever get to feel. Most people never have the walls stripped away. Most people never find out what's left when the title is gone, and the building is locked and the morning stretches out with no instructions. You found out, now use it. The same hands that opened that door 10,000 times can build the door that no one else holds the key to. You walked into that building for the last time and walked out for the first.